Recently, I've had some really good experiences with the watches from AddiesDive. I've owned a few of them in the past, but the more recent ones that I've had seem to be showing that they are getting better and better quality, yet still staying very affordable, which is why when AddiesDive reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to buy one of our watches? We'll give you a discount." I said, "Yes, please," and I knew exactly which watch I was going to buy and utilize that discount. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And thank you very much to AddiesDive for giving me that discount. I buy so many watches that it really does start to affect my bank balance a little bit, so a bit of a discount makes all the difference to me, especially when I get to then purchase a watch that has really interested me, just like this AddiesDive 2055, something that is a little bit different from the other watches that I've seen. In fact, I don't recognize the design of this one, but I do know that AddiesDive tend to do homages or at least heavily inspired watches, so I can't say that it's an original design. In fact, I'm going to assume it's not. It's just that I don't know where that design came from. So if you do know what this watch is trying to sort of look like, please leave me a comment down below. I want to know what that watch is. But because this watch was provided to me at a discount, you would have seen that sponsored icon pop up, and I'm going to leave some links to the store that provided me this discount. And the watch that I'm going to show you today did grab my attention because of a number of different reasons. Firstly, it was the dial of this watch. I think it looks very cool. The color choices, this yellow and green combination, the style of watch, this garter style of watch, and the affordability of it. Just like most of the AddiesDive watches, this one's affordable, costing 150 Australian dollars. And when we look at this watch, really, most of what I want to show you today is the dial. So that's where I'm going to be spending most of the time. So let's look at this lovely green bike sort of material dial. I'm not sure how to describe it, but we've got a central polished sunburst green disc in the center. And then surrounding that is still that same type of green, but it is like a granulated or sand texture molded style. They look like they're joined as if it's one piece that has been treated differently, which is quite interesting, especially when the light catches it, because it really grabs that sunburst inner section, whereas it presents a more muted outer section, which is, yeah, really quite interesting. Now, on the dial, you'll see that there is a whole bunch of printing, and they're utilizing two colors, white and this yellow. That railway second track around the outside, there's some outer numbers, 5 all the way through to 55 are all white. AddiesDive in that cursive script is also white, and automatic just above that 6. The rest of the stuff that's on this dial, other than that little white border around the calendar, is actually in yellow and loomed. Yellow matching in with the hands, and yellow on those numbers and those little pips. When you turn the lights off on this one, however, you'll see that, yes, everything that was yellow is now loomed, and the loom's actually pretty good. These affordable watches, I tend to think loom is one of their sort of poor spots, one of the things that they tend to skimp on a little bit to save some money. And this one, well, it does do a bit of that. Don't expect incredible loom from this one, but I think it's actually fairly reasonable, especially for when you talk about the price of this one. But then let's look at the hands in more detail, because they're a lot better and a lot more detailed than I would have expected for a watch at this price. Now, of course, that stubby, big arrow hour hand is probably the one that stands out most because it looks most interesting. But then there's a nice long minute sword-shaped hand and a really delicate, very long, very thin yellow second hand too. But that's not the interesting parts. The interesting parts is the color choice. Yes, that second hand is yellow, but the outer sections of that minute and hour hand are also yellow. And the center of them are in this matte black. And I think whenever brands do this, they sort of put the center part of the watch's hands in that sort of color. It sort of allows it to sort of blend into the background a little bit. Even though it's not black on black here, it's black on green, it still has that similar effect, giving you a slightly sort of hovering hands feel to it. When you look at it closely, you can see that they're obviously not hovering above the dial, but it helps blend them into that background a little bit and does add a little bit more detail to it that has grabbed my attention. Now this one does contain the Seiko NH35 movement, which means it does have a date complication, and this watch does have a date at the 3 o'clock, as you can see. It's not color matched, but it's sort of fitting in with the white there, white with the little bits of white accents. I don't know, I think it's okay. But it does have a screw down crown. This one, they state that it has a 200 meters of water resistance, which is quite impressive. And being that Seiko NH35, of course, it does have hacking and hand winding. That dial is covered by a piece of flat sapphire crystal. And then of course, we've got to talk about the dimensions of this watch, because is this one something you should be considering? And size does matter when it comes to watch size. But before we do that, do you mind if I just ask, if you have not subscribed to the channel, I would really appreciate it if you just hit that subscribe button. It makes such a huge difference to me and this channel. It not only motivates me, but it also allows companies like AddiesDive to reach out to me, because I'm getting more numbers, which gives me access to more watches, which means I get to share more watches with you guys, and I get to wear some more watches. So yeah, could you please hit that subscribe button? But let's get back to this watch, because the case of this particular watch is a nice 39 millimeters, a real sweet spot lately, and I quite like that. It has a thickness of 12 millimeters. The lug to lug is probably slightly longer than I would have thought or expected, but it is 49 millimeters, still perfectly within that range. It has a lug width of 20 millimeters, but that bracelet tapers all the way down to 16 millimeters, making it feel a lot nicer and feel and sit down nicely on my 17 centimeter wrist. But now we're talking about something that I think is actually a little bit more subtle in regards to this watch, something that hasn't grabbed my attention as much because it hasn't needed to, because the dial has all the attention that I need, and that is the case and the bracelet. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever, quite standard, quite solid, quite nice, but it's all brushed. The tops of those lugs are brushed, that solid bezel is brushed, the sides of the case are brushed, the bracelet is entirely brushed as well, making it probably feel a bit more like an everyday watch or a bit more of a tool watch, but with a dial that sort of jumps out off your wrist. The bracelet itself, however, is actually really nice. It has got solid end links which have zero movement whatsoever, which is really nice to see. Solid links. Does have a push pin style to change out that bracelet, but what surprises me the most about this one is just how much I like the clasp. I've had a couple of AddiesDives before, and normally the one complaint I have about them is the clasp, and I'm not complaining about the clasp on this one. In fact, AddiesDive, if you are watching this, use this clasp on all your other watches. It will take that one complaint I have about your watches completely away. This one, it is small, it is sleek, it integrates into that bracelet nicely, it has lots of micro adjust, it is milled, it's just a nice clasp. Easy to use and no sort of movement like some of the others that I've experienced. Looking past that clasp at the solid case back, it has one of their sort of standard solid case backs with their AddiesDive logo and some technical information around it. Now, I said a lot of good things about that clasp because I mean it. It's a great clasp, and that actually brings me onto the topic of what do I like about this watch, because the clasp is something that I like, and what surprises me is that I like so many things about this watch. In fact, from the other direction, there's really not much to point out that I dislike or that I would even change. In fact, I think I like most things about this watch. The two things that I can probably point out to you that you might want to be aware of is, yes, the lume is okay, but not fantastic. But the only real complaint I have about this one, and it's not a big complaint, it's that lug to lug. Those lugs on this particular watch feel a tiny little bit too long. 49 millimeters is definitely within the range that is comfortable on my 17 centimeter wrist, but if it was 1 millimeter less, or even 1.5 or 2 millimeters less, it'd probably be just a touch better. And to say that this watch really only has two minor issues that realistically aren't issues, is saying something pretty good about this watch. At this sort of price, this sort of look, this sort of on-wrist experience, I'm really impressed. When it comes to AliExpress watches, I feel that the quality is getting better and better. There's a possibility that I'm just choosing better ones for myself, so I'm having less complaints, but I actually do think they are getting better and better. But one of the things that I do really like about AddiesDive is that they're not really increasing their prices too much. These are still relatively affordable watches. In fact, I think they're pretty much one of the best bargain watches you can buy on AliExpress. And this one is probably one of my favorite from them. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, or even if you didn't, maybe watch a couple more next.